that in our show notes because if you've not heard that talk, if you haven't seen it or read it, it is very, very worth it. Most of the entire alphabet, so very fun. But aside from your excellent wordsmithing skills, you are currently a senior software engineer at Narwhal, and you're on the core team for both NX DevTools and NX Cloud. And I think I can speak very much for everybody when I say thank you for your contributions. We love NX DevTools. And then like some of your other teammates, you are not actually in the United States where Narwhal is headquartered, but you live in, is it pronounced Leith, Scotland?
It is, yeah. Leith. Okay. The working Republic of Leith, yes.
Yes, awesome. And that's basically like the northern, I'm going to say like the northern port side of Edinburgh, right? Like, and it's near such amazing places as Holyrood Park and the Department of Magic, which is a real place, everybody, and Hermitage of Braid. And this is why we love Scotland, because you have amazing names there that in America we have like the most boring street names and city names. And we always use the same words like over and over. So when we hear things like Hermitage of Braid, we kind of work out on that. But
we have some very place names over here. I think we also have a village which has the only exclamation mark in its name.
In Scotland or Wales?
No, I actually don't know where it is, but it's a place called Westward Ho.
I love that. I'm gonna have to look that up now too.
Like the cash out cities, right?
What?
It's like the cash out cities. Like,
oh yeah.
Villages, cities, not cities.
Hers was a dollar sign though, so maybe we need to have a city with a dollar sign in it.
I'm sure
they could. All right, so then I find this very interesting as well. You kind of mentioned, you said that you had earned a degree in physics, right?
I was doing well. No, it's complicated. Okay. Cambridge is weird because Cambridge is weird. When you're doing sciences at Cambridge, you take what's called a natural science course, which means you take lots of different science courses in the first year, and you specialize a bit in the second year, and then you can still change in the third year. And I changed onto an engineering degree in the third year.
Okay, so that was now. Had you had previous experience in programming before then, or did you just learn about it about that time and decided this is what I want to go into?
Other than setting up, config.sys and autoexec.bat files on very old PCs, which you'd have to be a certain age to understand what those files are, or remember what those files are. And yes, I am that old. I didn't have actually done that much programming. Other than Spectrum Basic. That's a long time ago.
Eric always talks about really old tech, and he's still a sprightly years old, so you don't have to be old to know these things.
Don't tell them my age, bro. I don't want them to know. I may be 30, but I definitely look like I'm more like 45.
Whatever.
And that's helpful in my career personally.
Still a baby.
He is
still such a baby.
But I have 3 kids, so they've aged me very rapidly. But I love you, kids. If you listen to this in the future, I do love you.
Oh, that's funny. Okay, so then, Johanna, tell me more about when you first started becoming aware of, again, what you've coined as information occultation. And let's dive more into what exactly that is, what it looks like in programming. But yeah, let's start with that. Like, when did you start becoming aware of this?
So I think it's something I gradually became aware of, to be honest. It wasn't something I sort of woke up one day and went, that's it, that's the thing. I might have done that with a name, but that's only because it's kind of cool. It does have this ironic double meaning in that you say information occultation to someone and it sounds arcane and mystic in a way, which is exactly the kind of thing that it's trying to avoid. But yeah, I started programming in C++. I wasn't very good at it. I hated it. I still hate C++. There's a question from somebody called.
What do you hate about it? I want to know. I have to know. The people have to know. What do you hate about C++?
Probably I mostly hate it because I'm really bad at it. But it's really hard. The core of C++ is actually really simple. But then, which libraries do you use? And then the add-on templating, and then it's like, oh god, smart pointers. What are we using Boost now? I don't even know if Boost is still a thing. There's a quote by someone called Steve Taylor, which says C++ is an octopus made by nailing extra legs onto a dog. And basically do everything you need to know about C++. But yeah, so it didn't really occur to me until later in my career that learning programming didn't have to be painful. I just assumed it had to be hard. I always hated the fact that I felt like I needed a deep understanding of everything in order to do something, in quotes, properly. And this whole concept of what perfect is the enemy of good, or done, whichever one is. You can have a shallow understanding of something just to get something working, and that's absolutely fine. Just throwing something together is completely acceptable. Doing what you understand.
I totally want you to repeat that, because not only am I guilty of that, but I think a lot of developers fully believe that.
Yeah, for me, I struggle with perfectionism anyway, and I know that sounds like to some people that sounds like a humble brag, but no, perfectionism is absolutely crippling, because it means that you find it really difficult to start things. Right. You end up overthinking. Okay, what's the right way to do this? What's the right language to do it in? What framework do I use? And you just end up in this sort of paralysis. Yep. You never start anything. It's the problem I have. It's part of the reason I don't really do side projects. Also, I have a life. But yeah, so we shouldn't be denigrated for only learning how to get the job done. And I think. I remember early on in my career, I was probably just as bad as many other people. Dragging other people down for not knowing things. What's that XKCD strip about about people who don't know things? And on average, there's going to be 10,000 people who don't know this particular fact every day. So congratulations, you're one of the 10,000 today. If you've learned anything, you should be happy to learn to not know a thing and be able to learn it. It's an amazing thing. Bing, what was that? Oh yeah, the XKCD thing. Yes. So yeah, programming is just a means to an end, but we glorify it and we raise it to this level of the occult, and we put programmers on a pedestal and look at the way we treat hackers in quotes. Yes, there are some aspects of what we call hacking that it can be complicated, but it's not it's not beyond anyone really. It's just it's knowledge that is out there. It should not be hidden.
There's actually a really cool quote I saw today on Twitter from Michael Chan, who does the React podcast. He was a guest on our first episode of the season. And I really liked it because I think it's easy sometimes when you have a podcast or, if you run like I don't know, like just different meetups or organizations, or if you own a certain company, I think people assume that you have a certain level of understanding or knowledge about programming, be that a particular language or framework. But what I really liked about Michael was that he's very much in that position. He actually has a website where he teaches other people various topics. And I remember him saying that when we met him. It was just kind of like, well, he was very confident, don't get me wrong, but he was kind of alluding to the fact that like he doesn't have all the answers and everybody thinks he knows all the answers all the time. And what this tweet was saying today was, I'm not that great of a programmer, but what I am good at is looking up docs. And I appreciated his honesty on that. But it kind of sounds like a little bit about what you're saying. You're like, we don't have to have all the answers. We just have to know some of the tips and tricks and secrets to learning how to find the answers.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one of the most important skills that I have as a programmer is knowing how to search for things and knowing where to search. Knowing how to construct a Google query. That's what it, actually knowing which sites to avoid.
Right.
Like
not waste your time, right?
Yeah. Like don't bother looking at what is Experts Exchange, which is you've got to be really difficult, really careful about how you pronounce that. It's like what is it? Penn Island. Which is another,
oh yeah. Oh no. Okay.
Which
Can I tell a story about that? When I was a teacher, I taught third grade, and you know how like in schools they keep really strict like safeguards on what students are looking up. When third grade, we were doing a little report on like different countries and stuff, and one of the students was looking up Penn Island, and poor little guy, he typed it in there, and sure enough, all sorts of really great images started coming up, and all the other kids around him were just freaking out. Anyway, nothing quite like a bunch of third grade kids just looking at some Penn Island photographs.
That's the poor kid.
Oh, I felt so bad. Oh, anyway, total side story.
must be Amanda Scunthorpe problem. Which, there's another wonderfully named town in the UK. But I mean, I'm not going to explain exactly what it is, but if you look up spelling of Scunthorpe, you'll understand.
Oh, this is great. Now, okay, I want to go back to one thing you said actually, because you said that you were actually guilty of information occultation. So can you explain what happened, like what you were doing and what that looked like?
I mean, it's difficult to give specific examples, but I remember being very proud of the knowledge that I'd gained. I also, looking back on it now, know quite how stupid I was at that time, and how much I still had to learn. But I was very there was something cult-like about being a programmer. There was always the divide between you and everyone else in the company. You knew something that they didn't, and it was usually you usually saw yourself as above everyone else. Sales were absolutely you wouldn't wipe your feet on them, and they were absolutely your enemy, because sales would always promise stuff that you couldn't do, or you couldn't do in a reasonable amount of time. But if you don't acknowledge that that's a whole different area with its own skills and things, and it's a very toxic way to behave. And I'm not proud of sort of being caught up in it at the time. I think a lot of devs still are. If you look at Hacker News, for example, I don't, but oh dear.
You've already done the damage. Go ahead.
Yeah. I mentioned the site now. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. We'll edit that out. We'll bleep it out.
Yeah. Please do. Yeah.
Well, there's been times in my career I've definitely experienced that where literally the sales people would get really mad at the programming folks, which was me and my team, because we didn't build to the client's expectations, but we were mad at them because they overpromised, and our deadlines are because of them having to build all these features that didn't exist. And so it's a very classic conundrum there, and it's not good for the company at all. So honestly, it's better when everybody acts as one team and works towards pleasing the customers, but not just pleasing the customers, building value.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it sort of goes into why Agile, at least as it used to be, is a much better system where you've got everyone sort of literally on the same team. And everyone attends the stand-ups, and everyone knows what's going on. And you have your own silos of expertise, but you accept and acknowledge that other people have their expertise, and you interact with them all. This sort of monolithic dev team that are isolated from everyone else is and should be a thing of the past. And if anyone's still working like that, then I feel sorry for you.
It can be good in one sense. You want to have that team togetherness, right? That unity, that bond that kind of brings you together. But
oh, sure, yeah. I mean, there's always going to be you're always going to have more in common with the people who do the same kind of work as you. But at the same time, you're all on the company. You're all trying to achieve, the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you should all have to interact at some level so that you understand the importance of what each of you actually does.
It's interesting because I kind of experienced that in a reverse way, almost like where before I had become a software engineer and was contributing to different teams that engineers were involved. But I just remember when I finally got my first software developer job, it was like the people who, I was sharing that news with, telling them I had made it, I got my job, and it was almost like my relationship with them completely changed because I was now one of the club members. I had made it, I was in, but it was interesting to me to experience how I had been treated by these people before versus once I had that title. And really there was nothing different about me, right? I mean, I was still the same Brooke and I still had the same skills, but it was really very interesting to experience that. And then I've also seen that though, not just across departments, but I've felt that very much at different times amongst developers. So like from team to team or from senior to junior, that kind of a thing. So where have you seen it even just amongst developers?
You see it front end to back end. Front end developers always look down on back end developers, and
Really?
probably vice versa actually.
I'm really vice versa.
For different reasons.
For different reasons. Yeah, I've heard people say like you'll never make as much money because what you do is a lot simpler than what we do, which is funny because I'm a staff developer.
Yeah.
No, keep going. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, I don't know. I wasn't saying anything.
Well, okay, so kind of at the beginning though, you mentioned another aspect of this where it's almost like someone could be intentionally withholding information, right? Like they are doing something a particular way, or they've discovered a certain way to do something that is effective. I don't know. I mean, there's different reasons you could be wanting to withhold information, but how can you recognize? Because I've seen this too, where people will almost hold it back just so that they hurt other people, or to boost their own reputation or their own position, so to say.
Yeah, I mean, you always get the Rockstar developers. I hate that term so much. It's also 10x developers. No, let's not get that. But you know, these are the kind of devs who end up, sort of beavering away at their desk, doing something that no one else knows what they're doing, and they just, churn out products, and it's stuff that no one else understands because they haven't worked with anyone. They never pair with anyone. They no one. They can probably merge their own pull requests if they even using source control. And I mean, these devs are the worst examples of it. And the code they write is very rarely readable. I've got a big thing about readable code. Code is what's this quote? I forget who said it. Code is written for people to read and only incidentally for machines to execute. And that's mostly true. You'll find that what you are mostly doing with your code is you are reading it and trying to understand it and trying to alter it. The computer can interpret it great, but the reason it's written in the way that it's written, otherwise we just use ones and zeros. But no one can understand that. Well, except computers.
So I'm seeing a couple themes in this conversation. We have talked about hiding the occultation. I like that word because it really describes it well. Sort of like hiding moon, like the eclipses and things. And so we're eclipsing some of the knowledge, right? We're talking about clicks. We're talking about exclusivity on teams. We're talking about not sharing the knowledge, having folks who don't write readable code and don't participate as much with the rest of the team. They don't share. And this sort of, it almost feels like we're talking about the toxic culture of software engineering. It's like a subculture it's not a subculture. It's just pervasive to the culture of software engineering. We always want to be smarter than everyone else. We always want to be part of the Rockstar developer group. And we always are taught to do the most work possible and get everything done possible and to shine. And a lot of times your career depends on it. Your promotions depend on it. And your raises depend on surpassing each other. And it's a very kind of cutthroat atmosphere.
Surpassing each other, which is the problem. If it's, lines of code and don't swear then, it's a bad metric. It's a very bad metric. My favorite PRs are the ones where I delete more code than I add. Those are the best ones.
I love that one. She's always deleting code at Cisco. We're like, how does every pull request deleting more code than you created? But we're all appreciative of it.
It's because it's great as long as you're not trying to be too smart. And I think software development is actually one of the first places I realized that this is a problem. Trying to be too clever. It's when you see the Rockstar developers, the 10x developers, the massive quotes there around 10x developers. They will use some weird way of doing something that the rest of the team probably doesn't understand because they think it's more succinct, more concise, and it's usually about concision or brevity. It's much shorter, therefore it's better. But some things are really difficult to search for. If you're trying to, do you remember when you were first learning code and you saw the ternary operator? How do you Google that? It's got a question mark
what? Yeah, what is that?
Yeah, and unless you know what it's called, you literally cannot search for it. We were looking at some Kotlin actually earlier on today, and the chapter we were looking in the book we were looking at was about DSLs, and they were saying, oh yeah, and this is what we believe is clean code, and they were getting rid of punctuation, getting rid of things, and they talked about the invoke method on a class, which is just automatically invoked if you instantiate the class. Like, how are you going to know that, and how on earth are you going to Google it? The one that really threw me about Kotlin actually was that there's a convention that I don't know if you know the language, but it doesn't really matter. So it's not that important. But if you know what lambda functions are, hopefully like fat arrow functions. But there's a convention in Kotlin where if a lambda function is the last argument to a function, it can go outside the parentheses. Yeah, that's the face I made. Yeah,
I just made a face, everyone.
I know, we were kind of like, what?
Yeah, I was trying to read some Kotlin code, and I saw these lambda functions outside the parentheses, and I'm like, what does that mean? And then I was thinking, how do I Google that? I think I ended up Googling, why is my lambda function outside the parentheses, Kotlin? And eventually got to the right place. But this is not something I should have to Google to try and understand that code.
I think that's the important word here is understand. Because to me, when I hear about this, it was actually one of the first lessons I remember teaching. In fact, it was Eric who taught me this. And it was this important lesson I remember that stood out to me where I was trying to make something shorter, like really simplify the code. And he said, actually, I think in this instance, you should go with the code that is it's going to take up a little bit more space, takes up more lines. And I remember asking him why, because every other lesson I remember learning is always about how can we make it shorter or cleaner, I think is kind of the word everybody uses. And he said, well, for readability, for understandability, so that when someone else comes in after you and is looking at this, they don't get confused and lost at what they're reading. But he said sometimes the most important decision you can make as a developer is to write what's the most understandable. And that has really stuck with me. And I think it goes not only for a developer's experience, but for our users' experience, right? Because there's also that whole side of understandability from what the user is experiencing as they go through our